Well, meanwhile, Jeremy Corbyn put his party on course for a general election today, taking aim at the Prime Minister's Brexit plans and stating the Labour Party is ready to take charge. Speaking at the end of his party conference in Liverpool, which has been dominated by debate over the terms of a second EU referendum, Mr Corbyn said he would force an election if the final Brexit deal is rejected by Parliament. And in his fight for number 10, Mr Corbyn put the economy at the centre, promising an extension of free childcare and an end to the greed is good culture. Our political editor, Faisal Islam, reports now from Liverpool.
Please welcome the leader of the Labour Party and our next Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn.
All together now, Jeremy Corbyn's accompaniment and his message to members and the nation during fractious political times, not least in his own party. Towering above it all, Brexit, an attempt to rally the troops ahead of what they expect to be an imminent constitutional showdown.
If Parliament votes down a Tory deal, or the government fails to reach any deal at all, we would press for a general election.
They're hungry for an election not in their gift. But hang on, what about the painstakingly agreed referendum policy compromise? Yes, eventually, for those listening carefully.
Failing that, all options are on the table.
And then perhaps the core surprise of the speech, what sounded like an offer to back up the Prime Minister he's trying to remove.
But let me also reach out to the Prime Minister. You see, I reach out to everybody who's currently apparently doing the negotiations. If you deliver a deal that includes a customs union and no hard border in Ireland, if you protect jobs, people's rights at work and environmental and consumer standards, then we will support that sensible deal, a deal that would be backed by most of businesses in the world and trade unions. But if you can't negotiate that deal, then you need to make way for a party that can and will.
A Brexit helping hand from him to Theresa May? Really? No. This is a party expecting an imminent Brexit breakdown, and they want to pin that squarely on the government and the Prime Minister as the Corbynites assume control of this party from top to bottom.
The radical economic policies pushed by him and his shadow chancellor are now Labour's mainstream. From multi-billion increases in childcare, attacks on bankrupt private finance initiatives and attacks on some second homes.
A solidarity fund for those with two homes to help those without any home at all.
Mr Corbyn arguing there is a new majority in the nation for left-wing populism.
What's long been a scam is now a crisis.
Stretching as far as the ex-Tory Treasury Minister, Lord O'Neill, who said this week that much of this agenda captures the mood of our time.
And let me say to his lordship, you're welcome. Come and join us in the new political mainstream if you wish.
The summer has been a torrid time for Mr Corbyn on the issue of anti-Semitism. Here, not quite the requested apology as he asked to draw a line.
I say this to all in the Jewish community. This party, this movement, will always be implacable campaigners against anti-Semitism and racism in all its forms. We are your allies.
But at the end of an hour-long speech, a rallying cry to rebuild a divided country.
Build a Britain for that security together, and we can! Thank you, Conference!
The shadow cabinet keeping to the Brexit script.
What we want to happen next, if Theresa May puts a deal forward and it doesn't meet our six tests or put our economy first, or she presents a no-deal situation which would be absolutely catastrophic for business and industry, we want to see a general election.
Everybody has agreed on the Brexit position exactly as we set out.
What we should be concentrating on is trying to force a general election. The problem with the Prime Minister and this Conservative government is that they have lost the respect and the authority of the rest of Europe.
Coordinated message, if not dancing, from this party to keep options open on Brexit that after a tough few months, that compromise buying a confident Jeremy Corbyn some much-needed party unity on almost everything else. Tomorrow, he meets Michelle Barney. Faisal Islam, Sky News in Liverpool.
Good evening. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has declared that his party is ready to start work on a radical plan to rebuild and transform Britain. And he says his party is ready to govern. In his closing speech at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, he said he would kickstart a green jobs revolution, creating 400,000 new positions. He also said Labour was committed to reducing the UK's net carbon emissions by 60% by 2030 and to zero by 2050. Mr Corbyn said he would only support the Prime Minister's deal on leaving the European Union if it includes a customs union, something Theresa May has ruled out. Our political editor Laura Koonsberg sent this report from Liverpool.
Adored here, on his turf and on his terms, even joining in that familiar anthem.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Hoping to provide a contrast of political primary colours.
Labour trades in hope for the many, not favours for the few. That is our strength, and together we're going to change Britain.
Labour here, more at ease with itself this year. But Mr Corbyn needed to address one big concern.
The row over anti-Semitism has caused immense hurt and anxiety in the Jewish community and great dismay in the Labour Party. I say this to all in the Jewish community. We are your ally.
Applause showing that many here had been waiting for that. But there was a message too to Theresa May. Labour keen not to be accused of trying to block Brexit.
Let me also reach out to the Prime Minister. If you deliver a deal that includes a customs union and no hard border in Ireland, if you protect jobs, people's rights at work and environmental and consumer standards, then we will support that sensible deal, a deal that would be backed by most of businesses in the world and trade unions. But if you can't negotiate that deal, then you need to make way for a party that can and will.
Labour sense power, the power to change, at home and abroad.
We support a two-state solution to the conflict with a secure Israel and a viable and secure Palestinian state. And in order to help make that two-state settlement a reality, we will recognise a Palestinian state as soon as we take office.
Jeremy Corbyn now in control of the party, his crowd behind him, believing you, voters well beyond this hall, are ready for them.
Where the Tories have divided and ruled, we will unite and govern. We represent the new common sense of our time, so that when we meet this time next year, let it be as a Labour government. Our task is to build Britain. Build a Britain together. Build a Britain for that security together, and we can. Thank you, conference.
This room loved it. Classic comfort zone Corbyn. His belief that Britain is not fair and a bigger state can fix it.
This man looked like a Prime Minister in waiting, a People's Prime Minister.
No one was arguing for alternatives for austerity until 3 years ago when Jeremy Corbyn got elected. Now there is an alternative. Lots of people have got hope.
And it shows clarity and it shows confidence.
You think your dad's changed in the time that he's done the job?
Much smoother and he's grown into it. I think we're seeing a new political centre.
Divisions linger in Labour, especially over Brexit. Yet this transformed party is now moving in one direction. to be the country's next leader. His task, to make the radical seem reasonable outside the hall. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News, Liverpool.
Well, our economics editor Kamal Ahmed is here, and he says he is going to work on a radical plan to transform Britain. Is it achievable, though?
Well, it's certainly radical, Sophie. The notion of whether it's achievable, we won't really know until he enters government, if he is successful in the next general election as he wants to be. And when you do get into government, any leader with a radical plan, as Mr Corbyn has, does face some brutal realities. Britain is a global open market. If businesses here feel that costs will go up, that they're going to lose their rights to their shares, that they'll be forced to nationalise and to sell their companies to the government, then of course they can invest elsewhere, and that means that money that could be used here for infrastructure projects, for example, may go elsewhere. That's called capital flight. That'll be risk number one for Mr Corbyn if he becomes Prime Minister. Risk number two is that employment issue. He said he wants to create 400,000 jobs. Well, the employment levels in Britain are very high already. There are tens of thousands of vacancies in construction, in engineering. So it's going to be difficult for him to create these new jobs given those high levels of employment. But I think Mr Corbyn really here is trying to touch a mood. It's not really about the costings and the achievability at this stage. He's touching a mood he senses is there in the public, who have not seen, or many millions of people in the public have not seen, a wage rise in 10 years since the financial crisis. The support for tax rises, for example, is at its highest since 2002. He's tapping into that feeling among many people that the economy isn't working.
Kamal Ahmed, thank you.
Well, speaking of the Prime Minister, there's an argument she needs all the help she can get back here in pushing through Brexit. And today she did get an offer from what you might say is an unlikely quarter, the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, and in rather an unlikely setting, the heart of his party conference speech. But this being politics, there was a bit of a catch. He said he would support a deal if it included all the things that Labour wants, including a customs union. In the round, there was plenty of policy in Mr Corbyn's speech, which he said they must now take to every part of the country so that when the party met next year, it would be as a Labour government.
How are you doing? Nice to see you here.
He's made this conference all about change, not least in Labour policy. And in his attempt to rise to Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn was changing the tune yet again today.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Yesterday, it was thumbs down to the Prime Minister's Brexit deal if it doesn't meet Labour's 6 tests. But after a tribute to his wife,
Tu eres mi fuerza y mi apoyo. Gracias, Laurita.
Jeremy Corbyn also showed a little love to Theresa May. Perhaps worried it looks like Labour's blocking Brexit, he sounded more open to a deal, but still willing to push her out the way.
Let me also reach out to the Prime Minister. You see, I reach out to everybody. If you deliver a deal that includes a customs union and no hard border in Ireland, if you protect jobs, people's rights at work and environmental and consumer standards, then we will support that sensible deal. But if you can't negotiate that deal, then you need to make way for a party that can and will.
The rest of his message was far more consistent.
We're going to change Britain, transform Britain. Change, rebuild and transform. A radical plan to rebuild and transform.
That plan is now pretty familiar. Renationalising rail, water and energy, more money for health, policing and childcare, but also 400,000 new jobs created by tackling climate change.
Labour will kickstart a green jobs revolution and create skilled jobs in every nation and region of this country.
But for all the applause here, there was an admission that not everyone feels able to join in.
The row over anti-Semitism has caused immense hurt and anxiety in the Jewish community and great dismay in the Labour Party. But I hope and believe we can work together to draw a line under it.
But if support for Palestine has sometimes caused the sensitivities, there was no doubt they still fly the flag here.
In order to help make that two-state settlement a reality, we will recognise a Palestinian state as soon as we take office.
The old way of running the world isn't working, he said. And back home, Labour is poised to start anew.
Our task is to build a Britain for that security together, and we can. Thank you, conference.
Jeremy Corbyn's always followed his own agenda, but today he spoke with the confidence that this party now follows it too. He promised his revolution is ready to rise just as soon as the government falls. But on that other great change of our time, well, he may just have confused the party's policy once more on Brexit.
Do the 6 tests still apply?
Yes, we've said it over and over again. I think you're trying to find division where there isn't any.
Have you just softened your Brexit tests?
No.
That is a softening, isn't it?
It's not. That's Jeremy Corbyn. He's a nice guy. Do you know what I mean? He's saying, look, we're in trouble right now. You're struggling, Prime Minister. I'll help you.
So while he and the Prime Minister have similar rhythm, there is no mistaking the difference in rhetoric. Paul Brand, News at 10, Liverpool.
And fresh from that rhythm in Liverpool, if that's the right way to put it, Robert is here. What did you make of Mr Corbyn's big, bold offer today?
So I thought it was real. And why I say that is because when I talk to officials in Brussels, when I talk to those working for other European Union governments, you know, when I talk to Tory backbenchers, they all say that actually a deal that could be done by the European Union is one that could keep some of Chequers, in particular the so-called common rule book for goods, but would have to turn her very complicated customs arrangements into a customs union. And to be frank, that is basically what Corbyn is saying he could sign up to. Now, this, in my view, puts the Prime Minister in a very difficult position because the problem for her is choosing between a deal that is doable and keeping her party together. Because, you know, that is probably a deal that, with Labour support, will get through the House of Commons. It is a deal that Brussels would accept. But maybe 100 Tory MPs would reject it because it would involve her abandoning her plans to do free trade deals. So what a horrible choice she faces. A deal that is a proper, orderly Brexit versus keeping her party together. It's a nightmare that very few Prime Ministers in history have confronted.
It's very difficult. Now, you've just come hot-footed here from recording your programme, which is moved from Sunday to Wednesday and goes out after this, so stay up to watch it, please do. But you had Amber Rudd on. It sounds like she had some rather interesting things to say.
Yeah, I mean, you know, she committed what we called in the trade a bit of news. And that's two things.
Can't complain about that, can we?
Certainly not complaining. And she said two very striking things. One is she is probably the first very senior Tory, she was only Home Secretary recently, to have said that if it's a choice between a no-deal Brexit and a referendum, a people's vote, she would back a people's vote. The other thing she said, which again shows you how boxed in the Prime Minister is, we know that there are about 40 hardcore Brexiters who would vote against her Chequers plan. What Amber Rudd said is, if she does what those Brexiters want and adopts a so-called Canada plus free trade deal, she would vote against that kind of free trade deal. And she thinks there are about 40 other more Remainy Tory MPs who would also vote against a trade deal of that sort. So it just reinforces the point I made before, which is one of the huge challenges that Theresa May faces is keeping her party together, whatever Brexit plan she comes up with.
OK, so we said before, who would be Theresa May? Robert, thank you very much indeed.